Here's food for thought. All right. Do you know scientists and mathematicians sat down and they calculated out for one human being to have completed just one of the many prophecies in the Old Testament of the Bible, the odds of them completing that prophecy is, well, basically 1 trillion to 1, or is the other, or is it's also referred to as 1/10 to the power of 1? Anyhow, it's, the fact that they even say that to complete even more than 1 is basically astronomically impossible for one person to do. Especially a total of 300 to 500, which is roughly estimated how many prophecies Jesus Christ fulfilled during his 33 and a half years on this planet. Now stop and think about that. They said it would take the workings of God to fulfill that many prophecies. Or someone in connection to God. Basically God would have to be working with them to complete these prophecies. And yet Jesus did it. He completed, they estimate, anywhere from 300 to 500 prophecies, which is a scientific impossibility. And yet he did it. Jesus Christ did it. And people sit there and say, oh, he can't, he's not the Son of God. How do you explain it? He managed to fulfill 300 to 500 prophecies. And I guess there's like 1,000 or more. That's a lot of prophecies to fulfill. The only reason he didn't finish fulfilling them is because they were prophesied for his return. The rest of them were for his return. And one of them that's a mainstay, that why the Jews don't believe he's the Son of God, is because, in the Messiah, is because in the Bible it foretells that the Messiah will come and he'll be of the house of David, King David, David that defeated Goliath. And the Jews say, Joseph was of the son of David, of the bloodline of David, but Jesus wasn't. Now, here's the kicker for you. People say, all right, cover this too, that because Mary was engaged to Joseph and eventually married him, that puts her in the house of David. But the Jews that don't believe in him say, no, he had to be born of the house of David, meaning of the bloodline. But what a lot of Jews ignore is the fact they scientifically proved historically that Jesus' mother, Mary, was a distant relative of Joseph, who shared a relative that was related to David. So she was of the house of King David, which completes that prophecy foretelling of him. And they said the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. He was born in Bethlehem. He grew up in Nazareth, yes, but he was born in Bethlehem. He's completed all these prophecies, and they still deny him. Which is ridiculous. Also, some point out that people said that his disciples removed his body from the tomb. No. There was too much detail, plus the angels that were sitting in front of his tomb saying, he's not there, the Christ has risen. When Mary Magdalene, and I don't know if it was his mother Mary or another Mary, came to anoint his body with oils and, herbs and that, like they did in those times. When they looked in, Mary Magdalene, I think it was, looked in, the shroud that the burial shroud that was wrapped around his body was neatly folded, as was the face shroud that was laid over his face before the burial shroud was placed over his body and tied around the neck. And I think it's the midsection, the waistline, and the feet. All those, if I remember correctly from what I've seen in diagrams, and that was where his body was tied off. It was impossible for just the few of them to have Mary to have moved the bodies, let alone his disciples were never seen in the vicinity of his burial tomb because they were ashamed of themselves because they betrayed Jesus, as on the aspect of Peter denounced him 3 times. They were terrified that they were going to be killed alongside with them, and that, but when you stop think about it, it was actually God's working that they fled from him and left him. Because if the Pharisees and the high priests had gotten a hold of him, they would have had them executed as well, and would have basically abolished any pathing works Jesus had did for the growth and development of Christianity. And Jesus is one of the most identifiable figures in human history. How do I put it? He had no high education. They called him teacher. He wasn't rich. They called him master. They called him healer, even though he wasn't a doctor. They called him Lord, but he didn't have a kingdom on earth. They called him King of Kings. And, the kings and emperors of the time feared him. No one has had the biggest impact on human history than Jesus. Jesus' face and artist renderings are all, the most famous images ever. You see a man on the cross, everyone says that's Jesus on the cross. He's the most recognizable, most famous historical person ever. Pontius Pilate talked about him, even though they said, people say he never existed. Pontius Pilate, the one who had him whipped, flogged, whatever, he wrote to Augustus Caesar, who was Caesar at the time, about Jesus, and he talked about him. There's an artist rendering someone did, or doodle, and it's of a man on a cross with a donkey's head. And the drawing says, Jesus, King of the Jews. Yeah, there's an artist rendering not artist rendering, but a doodle And it's a man with a donkey's head, and it says Jesus of Nazareth on the drawing. And it shows him on the man on, he's on the cross as a mockery of Jesus. And there's so much more. There's one from after a century after Jesus was born, somewhere they found a floor marking saying Jesus was God. There's silver tubes there's metal tubes, little ones. They had silver scrolls rolled up in it, and they scanned it, and they were able to decipher what it said because they couldn't take it out because it was so fragile. And it talks about Jesus. And it's estimated to be around 2,000 years old. As, he was around 2,000 years ago. There are so many things that point to Jesus, and so many people deny his existence or any of the stuff he did. It shows you how, even with proof, even with him coming back from the dead, which people saw, and if they were, and I'm sorry to say, I wouldn't die for a lie. And that's why the disciples were killed, was because they refused to deny seeing Jesus resurrected. I'm sorry, my dogs are being dorks and having a tug of war over a squeaky bone. Yeah, I'm recording you. Yeah, see, they're busy playing. Anyhow, there's all this evidence that shows Jesus existed. And there's all these things that Jesus did that are empirically impossible without divine intervention or having divinity, which Jesus did because he was the Son of God. Which really begs the question, why do so many people deny him? I've had people threaten to bodily harm on me because I believe in Jesus. And because he wants me and all of his followers to spread the word of God, because when you spread the word of God, you're doing what he wants. He wants you to do it because not everybody's heard of Jesus. Or people have heard of Jesus but don't know anything about, scriptures in the Bible, because nobody really truly talks about it. Because everybody's afraid. And everyone's afraid because, as Jesus said, people will hate you for my name's sake. And there's so many sayings like that say, the world and people may hate you, but remember, they hated me first. Because they did. He saved so many people from their physical ailments and that, crippled, deaf, mute, what have you, resurrected the dead a few times. And the fact that they still hated him because he'd called the Pharisees out. That's one of it. Unfortunately, it was God's plan, but it had to be done. Jesus had to die. And Jesus knew. He said the Son of Man will be given up to the Pharisees and the high priests, where they will spit upon him. They will flog him. They will beat him. Inevitably, they will crucify him, and they will successfully kill him. Jesus knew. He's told many people this, especially his disciples, and anyone that listened about it. He said, I lay my life down willingly. That's what the good shepherd would do for his flock, which Jesus did. He laid down his life for his flock, for his children that follow him, for his sheep. Who would do that? Except for someone that truly loved you. How many people you know would take and get whipped for you to the point that their spine is showing, that chunks of their face are torn off, that their genitals are mutilated to the point you can't tell if they're a man or a woman. And their face is so cut up and tore up that you can't even tell if they were human. Just to be put on a cross and die for you. What they did to him in the Passions of the Christ, as other people have said, he would have taken that like a champ. He would have loved that. They even, I'm still learning, but it's even said that parts of his intestines were hanging out. Yeah. That should tell you what he went through. How many people you know would endure that? For one person, let alone generations of strangers that he should not have known, but as he says, I knew you before you were born. He loves us that much that he endured all that just to save us. Who would do that other than God? This is Larry's Topics. Think it over, people.